You asked for it, and we're going to provide it. That is, of course, the great Kelly Victory coming back to join us today. There's a few interesting topics that we're going to get into. One is, of course, the measles outbreak, the measles vaccine, what should you worry about, what you not worry about, and the bird flu as well. And there's a new strain out there, H7N9, that has people somewhat concerned. And Kelly, of course, has been on the front lines with all of this. She joins me today, and she also joins me on the medical board for the wellness company. She is also a board-certified trauma and ER specialist, 30 years of experience. She was the CMO for Whole Health Management. And you can follow her on X at Dr. Kelly Victory. Back with Dr. Victory right after this. Our laws as it pertains to substances are draconian and bizarre. The psychopaths start this way. He was an alcoholic because of social media and pornography, PTSD, love addiction, fentanyl and heroin. Ridiculous. I'm a doctor, for sake. Where the hell do you think I learned that? I'm just saying, you go to treatment before you kill people. I am a clinician. I observe things about these chemicals. Let's just deal with what's real. We used to get these calls on Loveline all the time. Educate adolescents and to prevent and to treat. If you have trouble you can't stop and you want help stop it, I can help. I got a lot to say. I got a lot more to say. I'm excited to bring you a new product, a new supplement, Fatty. I take it. I make Susan take it. My whole family takes it. This comes out of, believe it or not, dolphin research. The Navy maintains a fleet of dolphins, and a brilliant veterinarian recognized that these dolphins sometimes developed a syndrome identical to our Alzheimer's disease. Those dolphins were deficient in a particular fatty acid. She replaced the fatty acid, and they didn't get the Alzheimer's. Humans have the same issue. And we are more deficient in this particular fatty acid than ever before. And a simple replacement of this fatty acid called C15 will help us prevent these syndromes. It's published in a recent journal called Metabolites. It's a new nutritional C15, pentadecanoic acid it's called. The deficiency that we are developing for C15 creates something called the cellular fragility syndrome. This is the first nutritional deficiency syndrome to be discovered in 75 years and may be affecting us in many ways, and as many as 1 in 3 of us. This is an important breakthrough. Take advantage of it. Go to fatty15.com/Dr. Drew to receive 15% off a 90-day starter kit subscription, or use code Dr. Drew at checkout for that 15% off, or just go to our website, drdrew.com/fatty15. And we are going to be joined by Dr. Kelly Victory. Of course, I said she is with me in the Chief Disaster and Emergency Medicine with the Wellness Company. And she is also on the medical board with me, a board-certified trauma and ER specialist, 30 years of experience, was the CMO for Whole Health Management. On X, you can follow her, Dr. Kelly Victory. Dr. Victory, welcome back.
Hey, always good to get the band back together, or at least the dynamic duo, if not the full band. So thanks for having me.
The band's sometimes just 2 players, like Jack White and his sister. There's
there you go.
Good bands, famous bands. They're just 2 people. But go ahead. I interrupted you. Finish up.
I was going to say, I covered for you last week. I hosted while you were gone last week a show with Dr. Alejandro Diaz. And I said in the intro that I think I take a lot of supplements, but you may have me beat. I haven't done the fatty yet. And so you may have one Fatty's supplement good. In your...
Data is great on fatty. Fatty, NR, PQQ, these are my jam. Fisetin, these are all things you should look into.
Well, and I take a mound of different supplements, all of which I think have great science behind them. The only thing I have said is if they ever determine that the little capsules, whatever the protein capsules or gelatin capsules that they are made in, if they ever decide that those are carcinogenic, I am screwed, okay? Because I take...
You're done. You're toast.
I'm done. I mean, just call the coroner because I take so many capsules. Don't put it into the universe, Kelly.
It's the lipid nanoparticle of capsules. It would be a problem.
Exactly, it would be a problem.
So, okay. And you mentioned Dr. Diaz, and he had some thoughts on measles too. So let's open up with measles, since you mentioned Dr. Diaz last week. My basic feeling about all of this controversy these days can't we just be left alone to practice medicine? I mean, really, can't we just, the doctor and patient, figure out what they want to do, and let's leave it at that?
Yeah, I think absolutely. But I think what we need to do is remind people, because people under the age of, say, 50 really don't have a good basis for understanding measles. You and I are roughly the same age. Measles for most people is a relatively mild viral illness. That is a fact. Yes, it can cause severe complications in some people, but relatively infrequently. If you look, for example, even prior to the rollout of the vaccine in 1963, death rates from measles, if you look from 1900 to 1960, death rates from measles had plummeted by 98%. They were down to a matter of a couple hundred deaths a year in the United States from measles. That was before the measles vaccine was ever rolled out in 63. Compare that to, a couple hundred deaths from measles. I'm not saying that's great, and I'm certainly not saying that I'm minimizing the death recently of this child in Texas, which we're going to talk about. But let's put it in perspective. We have tens of thousands of people who die every year from influenza. Okay? So I think we just need to remind people.
How many pediatric cases do we think?
Certainly more than a handful. I mean, kids die of influenza just like adults do. So I'm not minimizing it. What I'm saying is we've gotten into this thing where whatever happens, whoever can find a politically expedient use for that crisis amps it up and takes it out of proportion to the actual risk. So I am all about trying to say, let's call the things that are really worrisome. I tell people all the time, if you want to be scared to death about something, be scared to death about drug-resistant tuberculosis. Okay? Not measles.
And dengue and indigenous dengue fever. We by the way, just got an alert. Right. I've been yelling about this for 2 months. We got an alert, lo and behold, from the LA County Public Health Department. Oh my God, we have a problem with dengue. Yeah, no shit. For months. Right. It's been, by the way, we're well out of the dengue sort of time of year. They decide now it's a big problem. Dengue is like malaria. It's a terrible illness. It's
exactly.
bad.
So
you ever seen it? It's terrible. They get thrombocytopenic. They get septic. It's a mess. And we now have indigenous mosquitoes. We have the very mosquito that has arrived here. And I don't want to have a conversation about why. I don't care. I don't care if it's climate change. I don't give a shit what it is. We need to deal with that. That's all. Don't look over here, measles, and forget about these other things. We are biological agents and shit happens to us.
Exactly. And so I am not trying to minimize any particular death or illness or whatever it is, but we've got to maintain some modicum of perspective on where the real risks lie. So the reality with measles, for people who are watching, is that it is an extraordinarily mild viral illness in the vast majority of people. I had measles, I had mumps, okay? Both of them, all my brothers and sisters did as well. I also had chickenpox. I did just fine. Mm-hmm. So get that out there. And then on top of it, as I said, the reality, the harsh reality for those people who want to make this all about vaccines or vaccine hesitancy is that deaths from measles had plummeted by 98% in this country before the measles vaccine was ever made available in 1963. So independent of how you feel about vaccines, that is the reality. What we were taught in medical school, that vaccines were responsible for plummeting the deaths from measles, simply isn't true. It was a lie.
So there's a really interesting thing that a couple things about this that interest me. But one is that one of the astonishing things that came out of COVID for me was how differently pediatricians look at patient deaths than, say, ER or internists like you and me.
Right.
They seem to lose their risk reward judgment and have zero tolerance. They'll do anything to prevent a death, even harm thousands of kids, and they don't seem to understand when they do that.
Precisely, that's spot on. And I've said many times, and I'll repeat it here, the job in public health certainly is to weigh the risks and benefits of any particular intervention on the entire population, not just one single sliver. And so when I would hear people during COVID say, well, if we can save just one life, no, I'm sorry, that is not correct. You cannot focus on just one at the risk of harming tens of thousands or millions of other people in the process. Unfortunately, that's not how it works, and it can't. And you are right. People lost sight of that. And pediatricians, for whatever reason, I guess because of it is the life of a child is sacrosanct, and I understand that, but we cannot lose the basic constructs of health and public health.
Yeah, it's toxic empathy. One life is too many. That's crazy. And not that it's crazy, but it just harms many, many people when you do that. And I think it's not so much that I think they don't ever see death, pediatricians.
They don't.
And so when it comes around, they freak out. They just absolutely can't they lose their judgment. And so I think that's what's happening.
I think that's really a good point, and people don't understand that. Yeah. Your average pediatrician sees very, very few truly ill children. When kids get really ill and get admitted to the hospital, if they get cancer, they're managed by the oncologist. If they end up with a cardiac problem, they're managed by the cardiologist. If they have a bad trauma, they end up being managed by me. If they end up they get managed by the infectious disease person. The pediatrician largely does well child visits. They see kids in the office. They measure them, they weigh them, they see if they're meeting their milestones, and they unfortunately give insane numbers of vaccines. But they don't generally see really sick kids, because when kids get really sick, they are managed by a subspecialist. And that's just the reality.
And you mentioned the lack of risk reward. I mean, Francis Collins said it himself that they literally did not take into account any adverse effect of their safety uber alles policies around COVID and zero COVID policy, which was a fantasy from the beginning for anyone with any judgment. So we know they did that. It's disgusting that he goes around saying it as though, well, it's just what we did. So we're public health. Give me a break. But
they're getting ready to do it. They're getting ready to do it again, by the way. And we're going to be talking about things like measles and bird flu and whatever else is out there. Once again, they leave the basic constructs of public health at the door. The concept of a lockdown, for example, or what they're doing now with culling birds. The idea is you quarantine the few to protect the many. You don't quarantine the many to protect the few. I mean, that's insanity.
Insanity. I agree. And whether we have a new bird flu to talk about at some point here, but I want to go back around on measles and talk a little bit about the sort of the practice of medicine generally. I was actually dealing with it this morning with a patient. Now, I don't know if you've seen adult measles, but it's brutal. It's way worse than pediatric measles, but it's brutal. And I retook the measles vaccine about 7 or 8 years ago, because it became clear there was another outbreak then, and it was clear that people born before 1962 or something, the vaccine was not good. So don't even bother checking your antibodies. Just go ahead and take the vaccine, which I did. I had no side effects. And I had a patient this morning talking about a family member who's early adolescent in Texas, around the region of the outbreak, has never had any vaccine exposure. Do you vaccinate that child? And again, my basic position was, well, she and her pediatrician should make that decision. I would probably do it, because I've seen adolescent and adult measles. I don't like it. It's not a cool thing at all. But if somebody decided not to do it, that's between the patient. And the patients are vehemently anti-vaccine. The family is anyway. What do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, again, a couple thoughts. Number one, and I would ask you, when you got, quote, vaccinated for measles, did you get just the measles vaccine, or did you take an MMR? Which is measles, mumps, and rubella, the combined vaccine?
I believe I was You don't remember? It would have been weird if I took an MMR, but that's maybe all I could have gotten at the time.
And the reason I bring this up is because there's no question that there's been a significant association, again, not proven causality, but an association between ill effects and the MMR vaccine, which is a combo of measles, mumps, and rubella that is standard in this country for children to get. Interestingly, Japan, for example, outlawed the MMR, that combined vaccine, in 1993, okay? 30 plus years ago, they outlawed it. They still allow the individual components, measles, mumps, and rubella to be given, but not in combination. And they saw a precipitous drop in adverse events and a plummeting, interestingly, of their rates of autism when they did that, when they eliminated the MMR in 1993. So I would submit to you that there may be something, where there's smoke, there's fire. So would I advise, a child to get vaccinated who'd never had a vaccine exposure?
If adolescent, not a child, but an adolescent.
An adolescent.
It's a little different.
Again, I think that given the other things we have in our quiver to treat them with, immunoglobulins, vitamin A, and certainly the antibiotics you would need to treat or prevent any bacterial superinfection, I would probably tend towards no. Not again because I'm anti-vaccine, but I think it's a risk-reward issue. And I think that most people will sail through that viral infection with minimal, ill effects. And we have ways to treat it if they should start to show more serious illness. So I would probably tend towards no.
I'm thinking about the vaccine I took. I bet I could have taken the MMR because I've not had rubella ever. And I might have thought, oh, hell, just take the MMR. But So you mentioned pneumonia and measles.
Yeah.
So the dreaded measles complication is encephalomyelitis or pneumonia.
Right.
And Steve Kirsch is out there saying that the child that died in Texas died of pneumonia but got the wrong antibiotic. I don't know how you know that when you're in the middle of treating a superinfection.
Yeah, so I have not reviewed the medical records, but I've spoken personally with people who have, including Brian Hooker, who worked with Robert Kennedy Jr. on the book Vaxxed, Unvaxxed, and you and I have had him on the program before. He and Pierre Corey have reviewed the medical records. It appears that the child did have measles, but based on the parents' testimony, the child had pretty much recovered from the measles or was recovering the time she was admitted to the ICU with pneumonia. And it appears that she developed a bacterial pneumonia, very, very common, as you know, after severe viral illness. If you look back at the numbers in the Spanish flu, it turns out that the vast majority of people did not die of the Spanish flu. They died of bacterial pneumonia that happened on top of it and did not have access at the time, back in 1918, to antibiotics appropriate to treat that. So they died of bacterial pneumonia. This child was admitted and received two different antibiotics, which is appropriate. Unfortunately, and the reason that some people are claiming, quote, malpractice, and I will be on the record to say, listen, you know me, I don't pull any punches. I call it like I see it. But I am very hesitant to start throwing the word malpractice around when you are treating, and saying it's, quote, the wrong antibiotic. They used two antibiotics. They used one that would, beta-lactam, which is in the penicillin category. They used ceftriaxone, which is appropriate. And then they added a second antibiotic. They added vancomycin. Unfortunately, they should have, in retrospect, with 2020 glasses on, they should have picked a beta-lactam, something like zithromycin, which would have covered what the child ultimately apparently died from, which was mycoplasma. The child had mycoplasma was which is, as you know, very uncommon for somebody to die from a mycoplasma pneumonia. It's what you and I grew up, calling, quote, walking pneumonia, because it normally doesn't make people that sick. It's the one you walk around with for weeks, hacking your brains out, feeling lousy. But the idea that the child died, and that's what the medical records apparently are saying, that the bug that cultured out of her lungs was mycoplasma, and people are being critical of the treating doctor, saying they quote committed malpractice by not including a drug in the category like azithromycin, which is a macrolide. Again, I will be on the record. I do not throw that term malpractice out lightly, and I would not say that that's what happened here.
Well,
You had a child who was gravely ill.
I do the MKSAP every couple of years, and I just did the pulmonary thing, and they were clear that the macrolides, azithromycin, et cetera, are reserved for community-acquired pneumonias. This technically was not. This was technically, at least they thought they were dealing with bacterial superinfection of a viral pneumonia or viral illness, which is staph until proven otherwise. So they put the vancomycin on there. But the last thing you would think of is a second infection. This is literally a second infection. Is measles and mycoplasma, not a super infection. It's weird. It's weird.
It's very strange, and as I said, I feel for the parents. My heart goes out to the parents. Certainly, we have been able, however, to clear up some of the urban myths. A week or so ago, had been led to believe that the child was admitted with RSV, respiratory syncytial virus, and then was given perhaps the MMR while in the hospital, which would have been number one, a really bad thing to do. But that apparently is not the case. She was not vaccinated. That is not why she tested positive for measles. She apparently did, according to the parents, legit have measles. But it does not sound like that is what she died from. It sounds like she died from some form of bacterial pneumonia, likely mycoplasma, as unusual as that would be.
Weird. Very weird.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to swing back before we'll do bird flu after the after the break here. But hepatitis B is an odd one to me. Have you and I talked about this? Because I was involved in some of the original research on this back in the early 80s. And we were looking at the whole reason, I wasn't directly involved. I was in and around the place where we were doing that research. And I actually did some work on hepatitis B and ribavirin and things like hepatitis C, rather, ribavirin. But I was in this hepatology space. And they were focused on vertical transmission, mother to child, in China. There was we were not thinking about the U.S. No one was talking about U.S. We were worried about healthcare workers and hepatitis B. We were not worried. And the fact that the World Health Organization now mandates every child in America to get at birth the hepatitis B vaccine is so odd to me, especially since the only place they're possibly going to get exposed to it is if they have an IV drug using or chronic hep B mother, in which case you don't think we're going to know that that person is hepatitis B positive, and those children will get the hepatitis B vaccine for sure because we know this woman has hep B. It's not a random infection. It is probably about 600 pregnancies a year, and yet every birth in America gets hepatitis B. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's absolute. Now that I think is malpractice. That absolutely is wrong. There's zero justification for a 1-day-old baby to get a hepatitis B vaccine. As you said, hepatitis B is an infection that is garnered through sex, and through IV drug use. And it is easy to test the mothers. There's absolutely no justification for it. Now, to be clear, the WHO doesn't mandate it. They have recommended it, and the CDC has recommended it, and it is on the routine childhood vaccine schedule in the United States. Parents can decline it. And I recommend to everyone, including my family members, I have young nieces and nephews starting families, and who are getting ready to deliver babies in the next few months. And I have recommended to them that they decline that vaccine, say, I do not want my baby to get this. If you want to know if the baby's at risk for hep B, test me, the mother. And I can very clearly show you that I do not have hepatitis B, and therefore, and since my baby isn't going to be using IV drugs or having sex anytime soon, there is absolutely no reason for my newborn infant to get that shot. This is driven by the pharmaceutical companies, like everything else, Drew, and it's wrong. It needs to stop. But parents need to understand they have the right to decline this.
Well, except you don't get to go to nursery school or school if you don't have the hepatitis B vaccine. And my thing is like, hey, if the child wants to go into nursing or medicine, then get the vaccine like you and I did. That's when we got it. That's
correct.
Fine. That's good. But it's just bizarre. And I was led to believe this may be apocryphal. Go on 1 second, though.
How do you get around that?
Wait.
Sorry.
How do you get, because of the school thing?
Yeah,
I don't know.
The school's requiring
everyone I know
all
is
of these
very
things.
concerned about that.
Kelly, do you have advice on that? Because that's what people are going to ask is if it's your right, how do you still get your kids in school if they're requiring those things?
Well, what I'm hopeful is, and it remains to be seen, that under this new administration, that Robert Kennedy Jr. will be addressing these things, that we will have a significant change in the childhood vaccine schedule and change it to here are the options that you can take, but to delete any mandates. I am hopeful that we will remove vaccine mandates. Trump has done that with regard to mandates for college students. If they are schools receiving federal funds, they will have no more mandates for universities. And I'm hoping we will do the same with the younger ages, or at least vastly limit the number of vaccines that are required. The problem, is we've talked about this before. When I was growing up, and when Drew was growing up, the average number of vaccines you got between birth and age 18 was somewhere between 6 and 9, depending on what state you lived in. I was born in Ohio. I think I got 8 between birth and age 18. 8 shots. That is now up to 78 shots. And that's if you don't count the 6 for COVID. So you'd be 84. You cannot tell me that there's anything healthy about injecting someone 84 times between birth and age 18. The human immune system was not meant to be flogged like that with challenge after challenge.
We are so healthy now. Don't you know how healthy this country is?
Right.
We're so healthy. It's got to be what we're doing in medicine that's making everybody so damn healthy.
Right. I mean, it is an absolute disaster. We have rates, and again, goes way beyond autism. Yes, autism is in the mainstream, but the reality is, when I was growing up, I didn't know anyone with a peanut allergy, asthma, eczema, psoriasis, all these autoimmune diseases, ADHD, all these neurologic complications. These are things that are a result, I believe, of something environmental, and I can't prove definitively yet that it's the vaccines, the rate or the frequency, the rapidity with which we are giving them, or the combinations with which, that we are giving them. But you better come up with some credible alternative theory so that we can test it out. If you think it's climate change or exposure to, I don't know what, fluoride in the water, whatever it is, we need to do those studies. And as of this point, those studies have not been done. So to answer Caleb's question, I am hopeful that the new administration and HHS will ultimately vastly change the requirements for vaccines so that if at most kids are getting a handful of vaccines in order to go to school, not dozens and dozens.
We have to take a little break, but I am a little hopeful that things are sort of melting, I'd say. I don't know if you saw was it New England Journal or JAMA? It was JAMA this week. There was an article about gender affirming care and about how the data just isn't there for this kind of attacking the politicization of medicine. And I was like, oh, we can say this now. We can have a medical journal can publish a article about evidence-based practices and where we get our evidence and what the quality of the evidence is. Oh, shocking. But it's starting to happen, though slowly. Kelly, we got a lot more to talk about. We got to get into the bird flu. We got to talk about, I don't know if you saw Nick Holscher's article where he was talking about the 600% increase, 670% increase in myocarditis. Shocking. No shit, everybody. We got a lot more to talk about. Kelly's here. Follow her on X, Dr. Kelly Victory, and we'll be right back with more after this. Wellness Company knows that taking charge of your family's healthcare is a top priority, and being rationally ready, and who knows what the future will hold for us. Now TWC has a service to cover your family's medical needs, including and especially prevention. For just $100 a month, the One Wellness Elite membership includes 2 free medical-grade nutraceuticals per month, free prescriptions for over 800 of the most common medications, access to concierge telemedicine, available at a moment's notice, and a 15% discount on all supplements and the emergency kits. 15% off the emergency kits. That's quite a saving. So if you're spending $100 or more on supplements and meds every month, this plan will already save you money. If you sign up for a year, you'll save $200. And when you use the link, drdrew.com/TWC, you'll get 10% off the first payment to the One Wellness Elite membership. Check out One Wellness at drdrew.com/TWC and get 10% off your first payment. drdrew.com/TWC. It's all there.
I wasn't all Dr. Drew or anything.
Why would I screw myself? What am I, Dr. Drew?
All right, we're so fortunate to have the people that support us here in the show. As Adam used to always say, support us, you can support this pirate ship. And a group that, in addition to TWC and our fatty friends, we have Paleo Valley, of course. The venison sticks are delicious. Same goes for the beef and the chicken, low in calories. You can have more than one. They're like 60 to 70 calories. The venison sticks, as I said, are satisfying. Chicken as well, low calorie, as we said. And of course, they are made to perfection. They are impeccably sourced. They are chemical-free. They're fermented. You'll recognize every ingredient on the label. I always bring them to the gym when I'm doing weight bearing. It is protein, of course, and combined with weight training can help delay the onset of sarcopenia, which is the enemy of aging. It's all about longevity and prevention. So go to Paleo Valley, go to drdrew.com/Paleo Valley for 15% off your first order and 20% off when you subscribe. Our friends at Paleo Valley, don't forget about that bone broth, which I have been having a lot of lately. High protein, high quality protein, low calorie collagen. All right, Dr. Victory with us. Of course, she, as we've said, is a disaster specialist, an ER doctor. She's with me on the medical board at TWC. And I wanted to talk a little bit about Nick Hulscher's article. Is that new information to people? I mean, you and I have been talking about this. I've been saying for a couple of years that young men who got myocarditis should sue the universities that required them for no good reason to take that vaccine. It was so clear the risk reward was just not there. What do you say?
Well, first of all, it's not only clear that the risk was there, but that the pharmaceutical companies knew it before the vaccines were rolled out to the public. They had that data, Drew. They had it, and they had it in documents that they had hoped would not be released for whatever it was, 85 years or something, ridiculous. Fortunately, we haven't. Also, is the data new? No, not really. It's simply that Nick Hulscher has pulled it together in a way that people can now access it. We have known that the risk of myocarditis, and by the way, I hate to tell you, it's not just a risk to young men. That's certainly the highest risk is in men, young men 13 to 18. Where the highest incidence was, but we're seeing it in a lot of older people as well, and in females. I have personal, family members and close friends who have developed myocarditis. One has to assume, frankly, that it's the result of the vaccines because we'd never seen rates of this, to this level before. One of my close friends had developed a toxic dysrhythmia 2 years after his last shot, and is going to buy a pacemaker and likely a internal defibrillator as a result. These things really did a lot of damage. But the biggest issue to me, or the thing that makes me the angriest, I guess, is number one, that they were mandated when they hadn't been fully tested. They were experimental, and that is an absolute violation of the Nuremberg Code. You cannot be forced or coerced to participate in a medical experiment. We sort of learned that after World War II. But on top of it, that the pharmaceutical companies absolutely knew of this danger before they rolled them out and parroted the line, safe and effective, over and over again.
It really was a rough time. And If you remember back in 2021, I kept saying, is it the vaccine? Is it COVID? Is it both? We still don't know the answer to that, really. I mean, no one's been asking the question thoroughly enough. And I will be talking to Dr. Yogendra next Wednesday at 2:00. He's going to talk about his work on long COVID. And he said, I think he told me that the majority of these so-called long COVIDs were actually long vax.
Correct. I mean, the reality is, yes, that we know, and it is irrefutable, that the toxic part of this whole, formula is the spike protein. And the spike protein is clearly present on the virus. So if you get COVID, you've got some amount of spike protein. But, even your average layperson hopefully understands by now that the amount of spike protein you have in your body when you get COVID and clear it in a matter of, 6 or 7 or 8 days, compared to the amount of spike protein you have in your body if you've been vaccinated and are fundamentally a little spike protein factory with every cell in your body cranking out spike proteins in perpetuity with no off switch. Who do you think is going to have more of the toxic element? Well, it's pretty clear it's the people who got vaccinated. So while absolutely many viruses can cause, a quote post-viral syndrome, influenza certainly can, mononucleosis can, Epstein-Barr, there are lots of them. There are undoubtedly some handful of cases of quote long COVID. But it is clear that the vast majority of people who are being labeled long COVID are actually vaccine injured because of the massive amount of spike protein that they still have circulating in their bodies, which we know is in excess of what was the last study was 709 days, and they're still making spike protein, and that's only because that's as long as the study went.
It's so crazy to me that we know that this pathogenic component of the virus is the spike, and yet we continue to push back only 2 vaccines, and only those 2 are the ones that produce all the spike. Why not Covaxin? Why not Novavax? Right. Why not things that don't produce spike or produce a whole virus, or go ahead and make another mRNA vaccine with nucleocapsid? Why the spike? Why the push on that? It is so nonsensical. Wild.
Yeah, I mean, that's its own whole show with the evil behind this, because the data are in. Even if you wanted to give people a pass by saying, oh, well, we didn't know then what we know now, which I think is bullshit, because certain of us did know then, and it's not because I was a good guesser. We did know. But even if you were willing to say that, it is now 2025. The data are in. It is irrefutable. We know the harms being done. We know the numbers. We know the vast excess mortality. We know all the disease. How in the world could you still have these things out there and on the market? It's absolutely unconscionable.
All right. So there's that. Oh, by the way, I was thinking, I read some, when I had long COVID. And really long COVID, to my estimation, is a 1 to 3 month period of extreme fatigue and mental fogginess and maybe even some shortness of breath and things. And there's this evidence that there's a primarily temporal shrinkage in the brain during that time. And it turns out all severe viral illnesses primarily do that. Pretty much all severe systemic viral illnesses, when they cause, brain volume loss, that's where it does it. And it's interesting. I had this very intense feeling that if I worked on language or music, I would help resolve my fog, which I did. And it did. It resolved my fog very quickly, which is the temporal regions of the brain, right? Parieto-temporal regions. But anyway, just an aside. I want to switch over to bird flu. Tell us about H7N9, and should we be concerned? What should be done? It's sort of in the news again. Let's get ahead of this.
Yeah, well, so just to clarify for people, the bird flu that you've been hearing about for months and months and months, and the outbreak that started a couple of years ago, is H5N1. That is the one that's causing the great distress and the ridiculous and really flawed public health response, including the culling of millions and millions of poultry birds, which is responsible for not only the astronomical price of eggs that we're seeing right now, but the price of chicken and the real stress that we're putting on the food source. H7N9, another version, another variant of bird flu has been around again for decades. We've seen it since I think it was started in or years, I should say. I think it was 2017, I think is when it was first identified. And it rears its ugly head. It's out there. Thus far, just like H5N1, there has been no human-to-human transmission. These bird flus, left to their own, only really pose a significant threat to people in direct contact with infected poultry or infected cattle. There's no human-to-human transmission. Now, that's up to the point where they start messing with these in a lab. I don't know what they've done with H7N9, this new one, the one that they've just identified again in Mississippi. But H5N1, they're specifically doing gain of function research on, including at the USDA lab in Athens, Georgia, and the University of Wisconsin in Madison. They are manipulating that virus in a lab with the specific goal, stated goal, of making it, quote, more transmissible human to human. Now, why in the world would you do that? Okay, why would you take something that poses fundamentally no threat to people, unless you're in the face of an infected chicken? Why would you do that? Okay, well, I've got my own theories. I'm betting it starts with M and it ends with A, and has this is all about vaccines. And continuing the fear mongering and all of that as well, that because it was so expedient as a way to control people's behavior during COVID, people willingly handed over their civil liberties in a New York minute when COVID came along. And I fear that they will do the same if bird flu starts to spread person to person. But right now, they keep pulling things, now it's H7N9 is the new thing we're supposed to be concerned about today. If they haven't messed with it in a laboratory, I am not concerned about it.
Because of its not ability to be transmitted human to human, and not that it's not a serious virus if you get it. Yeah.
Correct.
I don't know anything. I've never treated H7N9. Does it respond to Tamiflu or any of the other antivirals?
It responds. It's not Tamiflu. I forget it's nitrozanidine, I think is the actual FDA drug for that particular bird flu. But again, there are many things that can be done and should be done if they're identifying an outbreak, the things that will protect those frontline workers. And they're simple things: nasal sprays, oral rinses with povidone iodine. We have one available at the wellness company, but you can make your own at home. Those sorts of things. Keeping your vitamin D levels high. We know that all of those things are protective. Should it start to spread to humans, then yes, there is an antiviral. As I said, I think it's nitrozanidine or zanidide. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. It's not oseltamivir, Tamiflu, which is the FDA-approved drug for H5N1. But again, I don't have concern about it affecting anybody other than potentially frontline poultry and cattle workers at this juncture. It's my concern about them having manipulated this virus in a laboratory with the intent that they can either drive the case numbers higher, have it spread between humans, and give themselves an excuse to roll out another vaccine.
Yeah, it's sort of it's such an uncanny thing that the press is even covering.
Right.
Sort of infectious disease outbreaks. That never happened before, and believe me, we've had plenty. And they don't even know where to direct their attention. As you said early in the hour, polydrug-resistant tuberculosis is a major deal, and they can't be bothered with that. But bird flu, oh my God, birds are getting sick. Okay. I'm not even sure the birds are getting sick with it. They're just sort of getting infected with it.
So let's look at what they're doing with H5N1 in terms of their public health response has been to go into these farms. They do group testing. They take 10 or 12 birds. They swab them with the PCR test, which we know is already a faulty test. They put all the swabs in one test tube. So if it comes back positive, they have no idea which one of the birds was positive, so they kill all of them. They kill all 10 or 12. It may have been only one bird, okay? If you let that virus, if you let that virus run through the flock, Drew, statistically, somewhere between 0.5% and 1% would actually get sick and die. 1 out of 100 birds would get sick and die. The other 99 will develop natural immunity and go on their merry way.
Right.
Killing all these birds is not only stupid, it is putting this massive strain on the food system. It's driving up egg costs, and you will not eradicate the virus. The virus is being carried and spread by wild birds, largely mallard ducks that carry the virus in their gullets. They come, they land, they mix with the bird flocks. A mallard duck lands on your farm and spreads the bird flu around. So what? Okay, if you lose 1% of your birds, you're fine, and the rest of them will develop natural immunity. If you keep killing them off and bringing in new birds, all you do is foment an ongoing cycle of this epidemic, this outbreak, and it will continue, and we will be doing this in 2030.
In addition to gain of function alteration of the virus, it seems like the virology community has convinced themselves that infectivity to human is sort of an inevitable thing with zoonotic infections. I don't know that that's so. I don't know virology well enough to have a really sort of developed opinion about it, but plenty of viruses circulated in all sorts of zoonotic circumstances never get near the human population.
Correct. If something's zoonotic,
and then if they do, they certainly don't go human to human once they arrive here. That's a whole other level.
And they don't tend on their own to get more virulent, more severe. So correct, a zoonotic virus can jump species. It can go from a bat to a cat, or from a camel to a cow, whatever, can jump species. And it could theoretically jump to humans. Does it very rare? We know that bird flu can infect, that frontline worker, but it then doesn't spread human to human very easily, unless it's been manipulated in the lab. When viruses mutate, and all viruses mutate, certainly, coronaviruses are particularly good at it. They, with rare exception, do two things. If they naturally mutate, they become more transmissible, easier to spread, and they become less virulent, less severe, okay? Not the opposite. So we have this new variant of H5N1, D.1.1, which all of a sudden, rather than just causing pink eye, which is what it originally did, seems to have an affinity for human lung tissue. It's getting into the lungs and causing pneumonia the way that COVID did. Well, I can pretty much guarantee, without looking at my crystal ball, just because I've watched this movie before, that is because they manipulated H5N1 in a laboratory, and D.1.1, the one with the affinity for human lung tissue, is going to turn out to have come out of a lab experiment. Left to its own, that is simply not how viruses in nature, without being manipulated by man, would act.
We're sort of here. I wanted to get your opinion. This may be something you're not aware of or haven't read yet, or I just found it interesting, the sort of little conflict between Meryl Nass and Peter McCullough. I felt like that she was reading different literature. It's like she wasn't aware of some stuff that Peter had access to. What was your take on all that?
I agree, and I have respect for both physicians. Obviously, you and I work closely with Peter McCullough, and I think he's a prolific writer and is very, very aware of, probably more than anybody I know, the research as it comes out. Dr. Meryl Nass, certainly had a tough time during COVID. She was targeted, I think unfairly so, and I gave her some leeway as a result of the fact that had PTSD from the way she was treated by the medical board during COVID. That said, I do think that she's misread the data, and I never think it is attractive to come out and attack another physician, particularly one who is generally on your side of the fight. Peter McCullough and Meryl Nass, we've both been on the right side of history for the better part of COVID, and I don't think it really helps the cause to publicly start, having this sort of cat fight. I think that she was wrong on this, and I would like to see her actually retract what she said, because I don't think she's aware of the same literature and the same studies that Dr. McCullough is.
I'm just so starved for the back and forth that people normally do in medicine that I was actually happy to see this. I mean, I agree with you that it's sort of like you don't like to see it, but I was like, oh, finally we get to like have a conversation, and they disagree. Good. Let's get to the data, because I think Nick Holscher is Peter's source of really great data, and Meryl Nass doesn't have that.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. Disagreement I love. I had a sign on my desk for years that said, argue with me. And I meant it. What I meant is, tell me why I'm wrong. Tell me why this was the most, boneheaded idea, or why I've misinterpreted the data. That robust, vigorous debate is a cornerstone of medicine, or it was until COVID.
Yes.
I read her comments as more dismissive or argumentative than sort of, here's a different way of looking at it, or I disagree with how you've interpreted the data. So maybe that was on me, that I read it as more argumentative than helpful. I think disagreement amongst physicians, you and I disagree, God knows, about a lot of things when it comes to the vaccines or things like that. But that's how you, I think, ultimately will come to the best truth. Yeah, it's really, if everyone's in a room and
100%.
If it's a mutual admiration society and everyone's just patting themselves in the back and saying, yes, we're all incredibly brilliant and agree, you don't really get very far. I think you need those dissenting opinions.
Lastly, Maha and RFK Jr. What are your thoughts about? I know you're very close with them, and I hope you have a role over there someday. But what are your thoughts on what their priorities are and where they're headed? What you're hearing, or what can you share with us about how this movement is going to take hold?
Well, for starters, you know that I have great respect for Robert Kennedy Jr., although he and I have agreed or disagreed over the years on lots of political issues. We are really very much in lockstep with the vast majority of things regarding public health, and certainly the way that things have been mismanaged. That said, he finds himself in a very difficult position. He's largely been fighting out of a corner from the day he got confirmed. They keep throwing up, they being the powers that be, the other side, keep throwing, the crisis du jour. And unfortunately, I think that the HHS and his whole team is lacking for a good voice, a good communication voice, somebody who's able to break down the concepts into layman's terms, put them aside. And you cannot constantly be in crisis mode. You cannot constantly be dealing with the crisis du jour, bird flu, measles, whatever it is. If I were in that position, if I were in that role as the communicator for HHS, I would, on a very regular basis, certainly weekly, come out and lay out on a Monday morning, here are the top 5 things that HHS is working on. The first 2 would be crisis issues, in this case, probably measles and bird flu. And then I'd lay out the other things beneath that we are working on, whether it's, the legislation to remove advertising, pharmaceutical advertising on television, or revamping the vaccine schedule, or issues related to funding of medical schools by big pharma, whatever it is, things that are not crisis. People need to understand, Drew, that you are capable of managing more than the crisis in front of you. I'm a trauma physician. I got to be able to take care of the guy in room 1 who's shot in the chest, but I got 40 other people in other rooms that I also need to be able to manage. And if I can't do that, then I'm failing regardless of how well I do at managing the singular crisis. So you've got to be good at both managing the issues, but also articulating them in a way that people believe and begin to regain trust in you. And unfortunately, I don't think they have gotten their arms around that yet. They do not have a spokesperson who has been capable of coming out and doing that. And until they get a credible, reliable spokesperson, I think they're going to continue, unfortunately, to struggle.
What would you like to see them go at right now, other than the three you mentioned?
I would like to see them, I think pharmaceutical advertising on television is a huge one, and disarticulating the involvement of big pharma with both the medical journals and the medical schools, because we cannot bring back integrity to anything that you want to vaguely call, quote, research or a, quote, study, if you do not change the funding source for that research and studies away from big pharma, because they're nothing right now. The medical journals are nothing more than the marketing arm for the pharmaceutical companies. Furthermore, and I don't know what it would take in terms of legislation, but I think we have got to stop people in Congress from accepting monies from the pharmaceutical lobby. It clearly has impacted the removal of Dave Weldon as the nominee to head the CDC. They did that last week because of lack of votes. They knew they didn't have the votes to get him confirmed. That was largely a result of people like Susan Collins and Cassidy, who said that they were going to vote against him. We cannot. That's because those people are on the dole. They are on the take. They have taken millions and millions of dollars. Almost everybody, both sides of the aisle in Congress, is taking millions of dollars from the pharmaceutical companies. And until we eliminate that, we cannot count on our elected representatives to do the right thing.
Yeah, I know that he had mentioned to me he wants to apply a RICO sort of statute to the journals in particular, because they seem so collusional or collusive in regards to what they will publish, what they won't publish, and then
we had
Kelly,
that.
when you look back, go ahead.
As I say, we had that conversation on the show together when Bobby was on one of the first shows with us. He said, and I thought it was a really creative way to approach that he said, this was when he was running for president. He said, were he elected as president, he would call the editors of the major medical journals, Lancet, JAMA, BMJ, into the Oval Office and say, either you stop taking money from the pharmaceutical companies, or I'm going to bring a RICO case against you, because it certainly appears that there's a pay to play going on here. And you cannot, as I said, you and I as physicians, and God help the people out there who are in medical school now, you cannot rely on anything you read in a medical journal, because, as I said, it's propaganda. You don't know what to believe and what not to believe. So we've got to stop that. It's critical, because otherwise physicians do not have the data with which to make the thoughtful, informed decisions on behalf of their patients.
It's so crazy when you look back at these last 4 or 5 years, the way that journals were refusing to publish medical research if it didn't follow a particular, and now they're finally starting to talk about how things aren't getting published. It's slow, but I think they see the writing on the wall here. Well, we are sort of towards the end of our time. Are there did I miss anything in our catching up session here? Anything else in your radar or in your crosshairs that you're concerned about?
No, I think those are the big ones, other than I hope that people keep a cautious eye out for, what is propaganda, what is fear mongering. Don't please let us fall back into the, mass formation psychosis that happened during COVID, regardless of what it is. If it's, bird flu, influenza, whatever it is, measles, We have ways to treat these things. It does not require a lockdown. It does not require, massive changes in our lifestyle. And it certainly, in my mind, does not require a new vaccine. We have ways to treat these things. And I just hope that people remember what we went through for 5 years. We can't sustain it again. We can't sustain it as a country. We can't sustain it as a society. We can't sustain it, financially, economically, socially, spiritually. We can't do it again. We won't survive it.
And I would argue that there is almost no justification for the absolute sort of casual withdrawal of basic human liberties. I just can't do that anymore. I don't care what the reason is, but we can't do it. All right. Dr. Kelly Victory, follow her on X, Dr. Kelly Victory, and no doubt you and I will talk again soon. We'll see you at the TWC retreat coming up very shortly.
See you at the board meeting.
See you there. Thank you so much. The board meeting. Right?
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, too. We have
She
board
sounds
meeting.
so excited.
See you at the board meeting. So I want to address something very quickly here. I'm getting bombarded with requests for commentary. I guess there is a documentary out on Courtney Stodden. Do you hear about this, Caleb? See all this action
not this
going on?
new one, but I've heard some stuff about Courtney stuff before. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm familiar.
So
Who is that?
she is. It helped me, Caleb. She is a woman who is married to a much older man as an older teenager, right?
A bunch of years ago, she was married at a very young age to a much older, I think he was a famous actor or a rock star. And yeah, Drew, you know the story.
Okay. So I interviewed them on my CW show, Life Changers. I did not produce the segment. I did not seek them. I did not know them. Or anything about them. And in that episode, the producers set up an ultrasound of her breast because there was all this controversy that her breast, where she had implants and everyone was attacking her on social media. My recollection is that she and her mother pushed for that procedure. I had nothing to do with the producing of it. I just hosted the program. The whole thing made me uncomfortable, including the relationship she had with this older man.
I remember that.
Though when I would address it, the mother and Courtney were exceedingly defensive. Up to them, what they do with their lives. I was just reporting and expressing some concern. I've not seen the episode in 16 years, nearly 20 years. So I can barely remember what the circumstances were, but I do remember thinking, it was so odd when I would address, aren't you kind of concerned about this?
Is there a rerun of Life Changers?
No, she has a new documentary out. And so
this is your clip in it?
Or she's attacking me for allowing that to have happened. That's not how daytime TV works. You're hosting, you walk in and you express your opinion with what's presented to you. And I was uncomfortable, but because the whole setup of the circumstance of her life and her relationship, it was very uncomfortable. And I'm imagining, although I don't know, I haven't looked at the episode in a long time, I'm imagining during the episode I expressed some of that gently because these were guests. And they were very defensive about anyone suggesting that their relationship was not ideal and perfect. I do recall that. So, and I know better than trying to confront so-called people that are defensive, because they become more defensive and you're then unable to have any conversation with them. And the circumstances of television it's an interview. It's not a clinical environment. I'm hosting a TV show. People get very confused about that.
It was just, they were breast implants, and now we have like sex changes, and everybody's like, oh, that's okay. Just go ahead. Change your sex.
And she didn't have breast implants. She didn't. She was able to prove that she did not. In my recollection,
and why did you have to do that? That's what
why did I have to do it?
Yeah.
I didn't have to do it.
It was it's a segment producer that set that up. Yeah.
It was produced.
It wasn't like you called and said, hey, I want to find out.
My recollection is that she and the mom were very anxious, or maybe it was the husband, that they should do this. So I certainly wouldn't have thought of it. I wouldn't have done it. That's certainly not my thing.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me at all.
Yeah, but okay, so there's that. And I have come to the point now where I wish her the best. I have no desire to get in a what did or did not happen conversation. So I will not be doing any press on this. That's my recollection. That's what happened, my memory. How she experienced it, I'm sure she's experiencing her life now that she stepped out of that, I guess was a sort of a Stockholm syndrome she was in. I'm sure she feels very differently about the circumstance of her life at that time because it was, and we did have a social worker with us. We could always get her involved too and get her recollection on, because we had a mental health professional work with all of our guests and to see if she had a different memory of this.
So were they defending that she was young and he was old, or that she was...
They were defensive. They were angry. They were angry that people were attacking their relationship because their relationship was perfect.
So it wasn't whether or not her boobs were real.
There was some question of that as well. I don't.
That was how they framed it,
anything about
Susan.
why.
If I remember, that was how they framed it. That wasn't Drew. That was the production that had framed it that way as kind of the hook of, oh, are they real or not? And then if I remember, then they brought Drew in as the host of the show. But it's not like Drew was her treating physician. It wasn't like Drew went after this interview. No. It can be twisted up many, many years later. But it's also, I think it also really highlights, really should just highlight how these underage people should be more protected when they're going on television. Like if their parents aren't doing it, then also, some other person needs to step in.
I am more in. No, I think the way to think about it is more that we should understand more about people's denial and defensiveness and things that are just sort of defended as they're just into their thing, man, whatever it might be. And people are at their liberty to do whatever in this country. We need to be more realistic about choices that people make and what the
right, and also
real consequences are.
People should be more forgiving. It's like, well, look, people look back at that and they forget, well, this was so many years ago. She was so much younger. Just be forgiving for what she might have been going through at that time. She's a different person now, and she may see things differently and is trying to figure her life out now different.
Hope she does.
She's what, like 50 years old now?
She thrives. It was almost 20 years ago. So she was like, so she's probably in her 30s.
Yeah.
So
what was her name?
Courtney Stodden.
Courtney Stodden, is that correct?
Courtney Stodden.
Yeah. Stodden.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway,
wish her the best. Is she still married, or did the guy die?
No. He's not anymore.
I think that's probably what the documentary is about. How she got groomed.
I just want to be grateful that you don't have to do daytime television anymore.
Excellent. There we go. Instead, we will continue here. As we said, let's get the guest coming up here. We've got new Showtime next week. Tom Renz coming in to give us an update on what he has been finding. Dr. Romeo Genda, he has been doing research on long COVID and long vaccine. Stephanie Van Watson's coming back for for Fatty 15 review, and Salty Cracker on April 10th, and many, many more guests. I've been looking at some of these European guests that have been spitting fire, trying to see who speaks English and who doesn't, trying to get some of them back in here. So interesting what is going on over there, and it will have reflections on how we see our own policies over here in this country. All right, anything else? Susan, Caleb, anything?
Nope, just want to thank
Starlink. We got the show on the road today. Yeah.
Starlink, thank you getting us online.
Thank you to Starlink. They saved us today. Our internet went down, and Caleb wisely advised us to have Starlink as a backup, and Starlink worked.
While ago.
And I used Starlink on United Airlines yesterday, so I am a new Starlink enthusiast.
Wait, how about me setting it up?
Brilliant.
I had it installed about, 2 or 3 months ago. I just saw the bill for it. I'm like, God, I'm paying a lot of money for this every month. And then, unfortunately, we didn't test it in advance. We should have, because we could have just plugged it in instantly. Instead, I spent like 30 minutes trying to get it.
You got it. We were only a few minutes late.
It worked. I mean, I'm really surprised.
We appreciate your patience in getting us here. Let me quickly go on to the rants and things. See what you guys think.
Super pretty outside, and the satellite was working. Or whatever.
Right. Does that affect it, Caleb? Does it get super cloudy? We can't do it. That happened.
It actually shouldn't.
Dr. Victory.
It actually shouldn't, and it's also just look at the quality. The audio glitches a couple times, but this is HD video coming all the way across the country to my studio. So this is pretty awesome. I was never seen something like this before.
Excellent. I'm so excited.
I'm glad I'm paying that little fee. I think it's like $150 a month. I looked at it. I went, we're not using this, but. We
are using it.
Today.
Maybe we should just use it and get rid of everything else.
No. I mean,
why?
I called my other provider, and I think the router just putzed out. So I'm going to get a new router.
Okay. But I mean, what would be wrong with using just Starlink all the time?
Because we need a backup. So
a backup to the backup?
Yes.
So, do we have to get two Starlinks?
I mean, we have another internet system. We could have that one too, Caleb, with an Ethernet cable that goes up here too. that we could plug in from the 2.0. So we have 3 internet. And you know what? I mean, thank God, because we can still run our phones and stuff on the other one and this one. So we have enough coverage now.
So keep in mind that we are.
We want to make our fans happy.
2:00 next week. And Susan, when your show, people are asking about your show. What time is that going to be? Since we'll be at 2.
People are asking about my show.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I think it's Wednesday at 11 a.m. Pacific.
So you're going to do 11 instead of noon.
We're starting earlier because I think, Caleb, have you signed off on that yet?
I'll check after the show.
As we're promoting it.
I'll check.
No, I know. I've been asking everybody for a week and nobody's responding to me. I don't know what happened. But anyways, so I think it's on Wednesday at 11 a.m. if I have any fans out there.
And have you figured out what you're going to talk about yet? I know you're working on some stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to just be newsworthy and see. We've got a lot of ideas. I don't know a lot can happen between now and then. So,
all right, fair enough.
Apparently, according to Andrew Anderson, there's some really big news coming out. There's something really big about to break. And I think
about what?
I don't know. It might either have to do with
good news or bad news?
JFK. I don't know. He wouldn't tell me what, but he said he feels something. So I'm like, okay.
Something's brewing. All right. I'll be back on Tuesday, as we said, 2:00. I'll see you then. Ask Dr. Drew is produced by Caleb Nation and Susan Pinsky. As a reminder, the discussions here are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. This show is intended for educational and informational purposes only. I am a licensed physician, but I am not a replacement for your personal doctor, and I am not practicing medicine here. Always remember that our understanding of medicine and science is constantly evolving. Though my opinion is based on the information that is available to me today, some of the contents of this show could be outdated in the future. Be sure to check with trusted resources in case any of the information has been updated since this was published. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, don't call me, call 911. If you're feeling hopeless or suicidal, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. You can find more of my recommended organizations and helpful resources at drdrew.com/help.